In the book of St. Matthew, we find in the 4th chapter, beginning with the 1st verse, the following. Then Jesus was led or guided by the Holy Spirit into the wilderness or the desert to be tempted. That is, tested and tried by the devil. And he went without food for 40 days and nights, and later he was hungry. And the tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to be made bread." But he replied, "It has been written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, or that cometh forth from the mouth of God." I have read the Amplified Version rather than the King James Version of this passage. We pray that God will help you find inspiration in what we have read in your hearing. We're talking about Satan goes to prayer meeting. The idea of Satan or the devil or the evil one is a valid idea. It's not a fancied idea. It's not an idea that we have cooked up in our imagination. Whatever name he may be called by, Satan is real. Sin is real. In the modern church, we very rarely talk about Satan and sin. But these concepts are real. Satan is real. Sin is real. What is Satan? Well, there are various definitions or interpretations of this concept. There are those who say that Satan is simply a negative impulse in the character of man to go against established order or tradition. There are those who say that Satan is a spirit and who is prince of darkness, who is the prince of evil, the opposite of good. That Satan is an evil influence which motivates us to move against God, the law of God, the law of nature, the laws of society, and the laws of good. Whatever one may define Satan to be, we're certain of one thing, that Satan is a reality. The Hebrews became exposed to this idea when they were dominated or governed by the Persian government and became exposed to Persian culture. You know, the Israelites were exposed to the cultures of many nations. They were exposed to Egyptology, or the influence of the Egyptians. They were exposed to Assyrian culture. They were exposed to Babylonian culture. They were exposed to Persian culture. They were exposed to Grecian culture. They were exposed to Roman culture, just to mention a few. And while some of these cultures might have been damaging, on the other hand, they were enriching and enlightening, because we learned something from all of our experiences. I wish I had somebody here to pray with me. Everybody looks so sleepy and so dead tonight. Now, while they were being exposed to Persian culture, they were exposed to a cultural and a religious philosophy that taught them that the universe was doomed, or that it was in two parts. That is, there was one part that was light, and the other part that was darkness, and that over the kingdom of darkness there was a God, and this God was known as Angrimanu, the God of darkness. And over the universal light there was a God, and his name was Aramazda. He was the God of light. It is said that it was from this exposure that the Hebrews evolved the concept of the God of righteousness, who was Yahweh, and the God of darkness, who was Satan. And of course, from this we become the beneficiaries of this exposure. It was from this experience and from this exposure that we learn about Satan, the devil, and the evil one. I know Satan is real because I see him embodied in the character and personalities of people that I come in contact with every day. I know he is real. Satan is real. I see him on the streets. I see him in the marketplaces. I see him in the automobiles. I see him in our circle of friendship. I see him manifest himself in the church, in the choir, on the deacon board, on the trustee board, on the usher board, in the missionary circle. I see Satan embodied in people. I wish I had somebody here to pray with me. And so, one day in the week of Jesus' baptism, when God had acknowledged him as being his beloved Son, in whom he was well pleased, Jesus departed and went to the wilderness, went to a lonely, isolated place in the desert to pray. But Satan goes to prayer meeting too. Oh yes, he does. He goes to prayer meeting. He goes to rehearsal. He goes to group meetings. He goes to prayer meetings. Sometimes he interferes with your prayer. Sometimes when you're praying, if you're not careful, he'll get into your thoughts. And you'll be praying about one thing and your mind is on another one. I want to point out that this encounter with Satan on the part of Jesus was a spiritual experience. It was not an historical experience. It was a thing that went on in the spirit of Jesus, in the psyche of Jesus. When I say psyche, I'm using a Greek word for mind. It went on in Jesus' mind, in Jesus' spirit. And so when Jesus had fasted 40 days, Satan knew where his weak spot was. His weak spot was hunger. He knows where your weak spot is too. He knows where you are vulnerable. He knows where to attack your character, your tendency. Satan sat down, in so many words. I was at the baptism the other day, and somebody spoke out and said, "You were the Son of God." I'm not sure of that. That's what they say. Now, if you are the Son of God, you heard people say things like that, haven't you? I have. People often say to me, you call yourself a preacher. If you are a preacher, you ought to do so and so. But thank God, it's not left up to your judgment of your appraisal whether I am or not a preacher. That I can be a preacher whether you believe it or not. And not only I can, I am a preacher whether you believe it or not. Satan threw the element of doubt in the whole thing. They say you are the Son of God. If you are, I've been sitting around here watching you, going through the motions of prayer. If you are the Son of God, prove it to me. But you know, some things are too hard to prove to some folk. And it's not necessary to prove yourself on Satan's terms. And sometimes Satan are the people that you meet and associate with. But you know, Satan is not a separate entity. As I heard one preacher say, Satan is too lazy to walk to church. If you see Satan at church, he rode somebody there. Satan said, if you are the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. Jesus said to Satan, it's written that man shall not live by bread alone. It's written. It's already an established fact that man needs more than the material. It's written. It's established. It's confirmed that bread or material thing. For you must remember that at this point, Satan was speaking symbolically. Satan was speaking symbolically. By bread, he meant, if you are the Son of God, if you are the Messiah, if you are going to play that role, then supply the material needs of all the people. For bread was symbolic of clothes, shoes, shelter, and all of the material needs of man. If you are, supply the material needs of man. But you know, while the material things are a real need of man, it's not his deepest need. For man was made for God, and his life is not whole. His life is not fulfilled. His life is not what it ought to be without God. Jesus knew that there was substance and reality in fulfilling man's needs materially. And we have our welfare programs. We have our housing projects. We have our subsidies by the government in many, many forms. But we have found that you can have ABC, you can have your welfare programs, you can have your housing projects, but this does not necessarily make people better. Man doesn't live by bread alone. No. So Satan said, well then, wait a minute. I have another thing I want to propose. I have another proposition. If you don't go for the material approach, if you refuse to be a material Messiah, what about being a mystical Messiah? You don't hear me. What about being a mystical Messiah? Come on, go with me. I want you to walk with me in your mind up to the temple during one of the great feasts when the immigrants and migrants from all over are in Jerusalem in attendance to the feast. And I want you to walk with me up there on that exalted ledge that encompasses the temple, where the soldiers walk to police the crowd. And if you go up there with me and jump down with all of the people from the Greco-Roman world present, if you jump down, don't worry about it, because the psalmist has already said that you're not going to hurt yourself. If you jump, the angels are there to bear you up. Lest you dash your foot against a stone, the people will go away proclaiming you as a mystical Messiah if you'll jump down. But Jesus said, I've told you, Satan, get behind me. Your role is not to influence me. Your role is not to lead me. Your role is not to tempt me. Get behind me. Satan said, wait a minute then. If you don't go for either one of my propositions, I have a third one. Don't break off negotiations. I got something else to tell you. Said, now, I want you to walk with me in your mind to a high mountain. I want to show you a panoramic view of all of the kingdoms of the world. I want you to look at the glory of Egypt. I want you to observe the power of Assyria. I want you to look at the nobility of Babylon. I want you to see the power of Persia. I want you to see the power of Rome and the glory of Greece. Now, if you would compromise some of your principles, if I could get you to come into a deal with me, if you would secretly enter into negotiations with the devil, I'll give you all the kingdoms, all of that power, all of that glory. If you just make a few shortcuts. I wonder if you have ever had that experience where you have been tempted to compromise your principles, to compromise your character, to compromise what you believe in, to make quick money and to get ahead. You don't know what I'm talking about. But Satan said, I told you, Satan, your place is behind me. Your place is not to lead me, but to serve me. Even Satan must serve God. Now, these were three traditional concepts of the role of the Messiah. Historically, these were three concepts: the material Messiah, the mystical Messiah, the political and military Messiah. But then, as you read the 53rd chapter of Isaiah, there is another concept of the Messiah, which is the suffering servant concept of the Messiah. The suffering servant. This is the role that Jesus chose. He turned down the other road. He turned down the other approaches. He did not embrace the materialistic approach. He did not embrace the mystical approach. He did not embrace the political and militaristic approach. He rather embraced that suffering servant concept. He was bruised for our iniquities. This is the role that Jesus chose. He knew this was a thankless role, and he knew that this was the role where he would encounter ingratitude. he knew that this was a road where his friends and followers would turn their backs on him. Why? He knew that for a while they would acclaim him, and they would say that he was a king. And he knew that they would strow palms before him for a while, and they would proclaim him the king that cometh in the name of the Lord. You don't hear me. They knew, great God, that he was, and he knew that he was, great God, who he was. But you know, great day, on this journey for the Lord, it's sometime Hosanna, it's sometime you're great, it's sometime praises flow like waters from the woodland. Oh Lord, but stay out there for a while. Praises will die down. No matter how good you are, and no matter how much good you do, and no matter how many people you help, eventually the praises will die down. Eventually the hallelujah will grow silent. Great God. And so after they praised him, after they acclaimed him, after they strew palms in his way, after they labeled him as the King and Messiah, oh Lord, a few days later, Judas came along, oh Lord, and betrayed him with a kiss. You don't hear me. A few days later, you don't hear me. A few days later, great God, they who had praised him, oh Lord, denied that he was the Son of God. Peter said, I don't even know him. Oh Lord, a few days later, a few days later, a few days later, that crowd that had leaned on his breast ran away and left him in the hands of the enemies. Oh Lord, oh yeah, a few days later, brethren, oh yeah, a few days later, that crowd left him in the hands of an angry judge and an unfair court. A few days later, oh Lord, a few days later, a few days later, a few days later, they led him up Calvary's rugged ground with a cross, not a crown. The only crown he had was a crown of thorns. Oh Lord, a few days, a few days, a few days, a few days, oh, a few days later, they nailed him to a rugged cross. Oh yeah, well, he chose that road. I made up in my mind that I'll follow him where they go. Oh yeah, oh, let the sun rise. Oh yeah, just wait a little while. prayer meeting. Satan goes everywhere. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord until I die. What you say? I say in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I in the Lord until the doors of the church are open. The doors of the church are open. You know Satan is in our midst. We are environed by Satan all the time. No matter how good you are, Satan is ever near. I want to ask you, whatever you think about the church, come on in. All right. For after all, some of the best people in the church, some of the best people in the world are in the church. Regardless of what you think, some of us believe in God and got our lives by. And we would be much worse than we are if it wasn't for God. I therefore urge you to join the church. I'm going to stay on the battle. The door is open. I'm going to stay on the battlefield. I'm going to stay on the battlefield until I die. The door is open. The door is open. On the battlefield, I'm going to stay on the battlefield until Can I tell you this one last thing for tonight? Can I leave this with you? To take it with you wherever you go. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord until I die. Until